And welcome to another video lecture for Mr. Mosier's 8th grade U.S. History class. We are wrapping up Manifest Destiny. This is the last video lecture on how America stretches from sea to shining sea during the 1800s, how all this land and territory becomes added onto the United States of America. Our textbook reading today comes to us from pages 357 to 361. Two topics we're going to be covering today: the war with Mexico, known as the Mexican-American War, and something called the Gadsden Purchase. Our guiding questions today are: what starts the war with Mexico? What was the fighting like in this particular war? What territory does the United States gain from the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and at what price tag? And then why do the United States buy the Gadsden Purchase from Mexico? So those are the key topics that we're going to be looking at today. So here's our map. We've added a lot of land, baby. It's Manifest Destiny. You can't fight it. Neither can I. America is pushing west. They are gaining land and gaining territory. We've gotten the Louisiana Purchase, which doubles the size of the United States. We've picked up Florida because Andrew Jackson invades Spanish-controlled Florida to try to chase after those Native Americans, the Seminoles, and these runaway slaves. Texas wins its independence. Remember the Alamo. And wins its independence from Mexico. And then 54-40 or fight, America ends up securing the boundary between the United States and Mexico at the 49th parallel line. So now all we have left here in what becomes part of the United States is this little land here in the American Southwest, which at that time was under the control of Mexico and had been so for a very, very long time. So what starts this conflict between the United States and Mexico? Well, in a lot of ways, this is a continuation of the conflicts of Texas's fight for independence. You may recall I said that after the Battle of San Jacinto, Santa Anna, the Mexican general, is captured by these Texan forces, and they were kind of under the belief that he was going to go back to Mexico to help secure and recognize Texas's independence. That never happened. Mexico never officially recognizes Texas's own independence, which creates a little bit of a boundary dispute because in the eyes of a lot of people in Mexico, Texas was still part of Mexico. And so there's these disputed boundaries here between, well, what is the boundary here between Texas and Mexico? The United States and Texas believe that the boundary was the Rio Grande River. This is this blue stretch here, right here, which is basically the boundary between the United States and Mexico today. The Mexican government believed that the boundary was more along what was called the Nueces River, which is several miles north. So on this map, all this green land here was very disputed territory. Texas believed that it was their land. Mexico said, no, it's not. It's our land. So it's disputed territory. You've got a boundary dispute. And so that's what starts this kind of conflict is this boundary dispute. Once Texas becomes added into the United States, it's annexed as part of the United States, the president at the time, James K. Polk, sends down the military to pretty much patrol the boundary, which he called the Rio Grande. So right here, the American government, the president of the United States, Polk, he puts forces kind of in this very deeply contested area, and there's a gun battle that ensues between the United States forces and Mexican forces. 16 American soldiers are killed, and Polk kind of uses this as a rallying cry to have Congress declare war on Mexico. There's a lot of patriotic excitement about the potential of this conquest of war. Again, this is all kind of wrapped in Manifest Destiny. America wants to go west. It needs to travel and expand its land and expand its territory. And so now this war with Mexico is going to provide opportunities for additional land acquisition, more land territory by going into the west. So America does end up declaring war on Mexico, and forces are almost immediately sent into that territory to seize that land here. As a result, this is a war with another country, with Mexico, which had an army, and these battles become very intense, especially as American forces are beginning to move into Mexico's capital, Mexico City. The fighting becomes extremely intense, lots of resistance. Heavy casualties are on both sides of this particular conflict as American forces are slowly moving into this land and this territory. As a result, the United States does win out in this battle. They are victorious. They do ended up forcing the Mexican government to sign a treaty called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that officially ends the conflicts and hostilities with Mexico. In the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, Mexico cedes land to the United States called the Mexican Cession for $15 million. So the United States agrees to pay for that land from Mexico. And these territories make up today what we call California, Nevada, Utah, and then parts of the states of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. So the war ends in 1848 with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and the United States ends up picking up a pretty large piece of land in the American Southwest, which includes these states today of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. Another part of the story of the war with Mexico was there was also, for a short term, another independence movement in what we today would call California. It's called the Bear Flag Revolt. There were about 500 American settlers that were living in California when hostilities broke out between the United States and Mexico. These Americans, along with some American generals, are able to kind of secure their independence from Mexico. And for a while, they had their own republic, much of like what happened in Texas. But as the war began to really move forward, the United States military moved into California and pretty much took over that land and that territory and did not allow for that Bear Flag Republic to maintain. But still today, if you look at the flag of California, you'll see a bear republic, a picture of a bear, and then the word Bear Republic on that flag, because it's a remembrance of its independence for at least a little while for this particular movement in California. The very last little tiny piece of land is this little tiny sliver right down here called the Gatson Purchase. This is the very last piece of land, the last puzzle piece that will make up the majority of what we call today the main part of the United States, the 48 of the 50 states. Why did America buy that little piece of land after the war with Mexico? Again, this is in 1853, so this is a few years after the war with Mexico. We've already paid them $15 million for the Mexican Cession. So why do we want this little bit of land? Well, we find out that we want to connect the West Coast to the rest of the country, and to do that quickly, we want to use railroads, we want to build railroads. But the problem is the Rocky Mountains. It's a pretty large mountain chain right through here, and someone gets the idea of, well, maybe we go a little bit further south. It's a little flatter. It's more of a desert, and perhaps we could build a flat railroad line that would connect Texas to California, but the land right here that's flatter, not as more mountainous, is not controlled by the United States. It's controlled by Mexico. And so the United States government sends down an ambassador named Gadsden. He goes down to Mexico and says, hey, we're going to buy this land for you. We'll pay you $10 million for it. And Mexico says, it's yours. And so they end up ceding that land to us for about $10 million. And that will complete the purchase called the Gadsden Purchase, but will pretty much complete this map of the United States. Of all the states except for two, Alaska and Hawaii. We'll talk about why and how we get those two states later on in our course of our studies. But Gadsden Purchase kind of bookends manifest destiny. You can't fight it, neither can I. 6 territories picked up between 1800 and 1853. The Louisiana Territory that doubles the size of the United States, buying this land from the French, President Thomas Jefferson, who was the president at the time. You have the Florida Purchase, started because of raids caused by Native American Seminoles and runaway slaves coming across the border. The president sends down General Andrew Jackson. He chases after them, creates an international incident, and the Adams-Onis Treaty ends up giving us the control over Florida. We have the Texas independence. Remember the Alamo. Texans end up winning their independence, and then eventually Texas is annexed, added to the United States. It takes 10 years because of the issue of slavery. 54-40 fight, Oregon Territory becomes added on to the United States as well, settling the boundary between us and Canada at the 49th parallel line of latitude. And of course, the war with Mexico started majorly because of a boundary dispute between the Mexican boundary and the U.S. boundary in Texas. Was it the Rio Grande? Was it the Nueces River? Was it part of manifest destiny? Was America just trying to maybe start something so that we can gain land, which we do in the Mexican Cession, this whole large area here. And then, of course, we have the Gadsden Purchase, flatter land at least, to build a railroad so that we can connect California to the rest of the country. So it's manifest destiny. You can't fight it, neither can I. America has traveled west for these last 50 years and has expanded its territory through war, through peace, through conflict, through compromise. One way or the other, that land has been added to the United States. So thank you for listening. As always, I look forward to talking to you again. I'll see you next time.